All right, what we're going to do now in this segment of the lesson is I'm going to show you how to do what you just did, identifying the profit maximizing quantity, the price, the average total cost, average fixed cost, and the average variable cost, and how to use that information to graphically identify the financial situation of a particular company with a particular market structure set of graphs, okay? So we're back to this. We had already done this situation as our first example in the last segment. And so what I'd like you to do right now is try and go ahead and pause the video again and try and identify once again the profit maximizing quantity, the price, the average variable cost, average total cost, and the average fixed cost. Go. All right, so we're looking for where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost, which is right here. And so we're going to take that quantity. We're going to come down here. And so this is 300, 400, 500, 600, 700. So our profit maximizing quantity is 700. Okay, so that's quantity P. We'll just call it P max. Okay, and then we're going to go up to the demand curve here, and we're going to come over and identify the price. And so 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. So the price, I'm going to put $90 here, and I'm going to write price over here. Now I'm going to start marking them and I'm also going to clarify this line because these dashed lines that I'm putting in are actually going to create rectangles that give us financial information about this company. All right, so we've just identified the quantity and the price. Now we're going to identify the average variable cost. So we're going up to the green curve here, and so I'm going to grab this green marker. And from this point here, now I need to point out something, is once we get to the curve here, that is our value. The rest of this curve, I just want to remind you, the rest of this curve is irrelevant. Okay, the only point we need on the whole curve is that point right there because this is the only quantity that we need. All right, so now from here, we're going to go horizontally, a straight line straight over here, and this is going to be our average total cost, or average variable cost, which is $40. So $40, which is our average variable cost, right? And then we're going to identify our average total cost. So at this quantity, we're going to go up here to the average total cost curve right there, okay? And we're going to bring that over. Kind of make sure that you can see this kind of dashed line on the video. And so this is 50, 60, 70 average total cost. All right, so here's what I'm going to show you how to identify, given this information. I'm going to show you how to identify, for this particular company, how to identify their total revenue, their total cost, their variable costs, their fixed costs, and their situation of either profit or loss, just by looking at the graphs. And that information is all about these rectangles right here. Now I want you to understand that there's not only 3 rectangles here. There's actually, when you combine rectangles, there's larger rectangles, and you can also combine all 3 rectangles into one big rectangle. Okay, so that's important to consider. Now, you don't have to do it with the rectangles, but if you are strong graphically, this should make a lot of sense to you the way I show you graphically. And if you are somebody who is strong in calculus, this is going to make a lot of sense to you because what we're doing is we are calculating these things, total revenue, total cost, etc., using the area of rectangles or the area under curves. Okay, so let's talk about total revenue first. We know that total revenue, the formula for total revenue is price times quantity. So this is actually a really easy one to calculate. So the price is 90 in this particular case, and the quantity is 700. So all we have to do is take our quantity, 700, multiply it by 90, and we have our total revenue. Now I do want to show you that that total revenue basically is being represented by the overall large rectangle, this entire rectangle, which has a height of 90 and a width of 700, and the area of a rectangle is base 700 times height 90. So if we do quantity 70 times price 90, this whole giant rectangle gives us the total revenue of this company at their profit maximizing quantity. So 90 times 700 is going to be, what do we got, 63,000? Does that sound about right? Yeah. So in this particular case, it's going to be price is 90 times quantity is 700. So the total revenue for this firm, the ideal profit maximizing total revenue, is going to be $63,000. Now let's move on to total cost, variable cost, and fixed cost. All right, so total cost, this is going to be a little weird. I'm going to move over here and we're going to use a formula. To find total cost, we're going to use the average total cost quantity, which is $70. I want to remind you that average total cost is equal to total cost divided by quantity. So now if we manipulate this algebraically and multiply both sides by quantity, that's going to cancel quantity here, and total cost is going to be equal to quantity times average total cost. And so average total cost is 70, quantity is the base, that's the width of the rectangle. So this kind of smaller rectangle, that is going to represent the total cost rectangle. So the rectangle that's below average total cost, that goes all the way over to the profit maximizing quantity, 700, that is the total cost rectangle. And so the base is 700, the height is 70, and 70 times 700, that's going to be 49,000. And so total cost, very simply, is going to be average total cost times quantity, which in this case is $70 times 700. So total cost for this company at their profit maximizing quantity, so this is the best that they can do, is $49,000. Okay? Now let's do variable cost. Well, we can go through the exact same process that we went through here for total cost. Remember that average variable cost is equal to variable cost divided by quantity, right? So algebraically, if we multiply both sides by quantity, that'll cancel quantity over here, and variable cost will be equal to quantity times average variable cost, which is this rectangle right here. Look, we have average variable cost is 40, quantity is 700. That makes this small rectangle right here. And so the rectangle that is below average variable cost and goes all the way over to quantity, this rectangle here represents the average, the variable cost of the entire company. And so we've got 40 times 700, that's going to be 28,000. So we're going to go, so variable cost is going to be equal to average variable cost times quantity, which in this case is $40 times the profit maximizing quantity of 700. So this is the best they can do. This is the best financially that this company can do, and that's going to be $28,000. Now, here you can do a couple of things. To find fixed costs, all you really have to do is subtract variable costs from total costs. So all we have to do here is because we know that fixed costs, we know that total cost is equal to fixed cost plus variable cost. So to find fixed costs, all we have to do is subtract variable cost from both sides, and we get fixed cost is equal to total cost minus variable cost. So 49,000 minus 28,000, that's 21,000. So we know that the fixed costs for this company are stable, fixed at 21,000. Okay? And so that's one way to find fixed cost. Another way to find fixed cost is to use this rectangle right here, because I want to remind you that average total cost is equal to average fixed cost plus average variable cost. And so all we have to do is subtract average variable cost from both sides algebraically, and we get that average fixed cost is equal to average total cost minus average variable cost. Furthermore, we know that average fixed cost is equal to fixed costs divided by quantity, right? So if we multiply both sides by quantity, we get fixed costs is equal to quantity times average fixed cost. And so fixed cost is equal to average fixed cost times quantity. Well, quantity is 700. Average fixed cost is the distance between average total cost and average variable cost. We've been saying that a few times now in this lesson. 70 minus 40, that's 30. So average fixed cost is 30. That's the height of the rectangle, times the base of the rectangle is 700. So height times base, this rectangle right in here, the rectangle that spans from average variable cost up to average total cost, that is the fixed cost rectangle. And so that's going to be, what did we say, $30 times 700, which is going to be $21,000. And if you were to add the $21,000 plus the $28,000, you would get $49,000. Okay? All right. Last thing we're going to try and identify here is we're going to identify the profit of the company. Okay? Let me go ahead and put some stuff in here that I think will make you feel better. That this little rectangle right here, this rectangle is the variable cost rectangle. That this rectangle right here, right, that is the fixed cost rectangle. The fixed cost plus variable cost rectangle, that is the total cost rectangle, because we know that total cost is equal to fixed cost plus variable cost. And then the super duper large rectangle here, all the way up to price, that is total revenue. And so here's what I want to point out. That isn't profit, didn't we learn, it wasn't one of the first things that we learned when we learned the profit equation, that profit or loss is equal to total revenue minus total cost. Total revenue minus total cost. So, if this large rectangle is total revenue and this rectangle is total cost, then all we have to do is subtract this rectangle from this rectangle. And when we subtract this rectangle from this rectangle, all it leaves is that rectangle right there, the one that is between price and average total cost, and spans all the way over to quantity. And so that rectangle right there, right in here, this rectangle, we call that the profit region. That is the profit region. That is how much profit this company is earning. And so here's the idea. All we have to do to calculate the profit graphically, we could just come over here and say, well, we know that the total cost is $49,000, and all we have to do is subtract it from total revenue. That's fine. Numerically, if you want to do it that way, that doesn't bother me. But graphically, if you want to understand it graphically, which would make you a better business person, a better student, a better learner, it would make you better at microeconomics, then you want to understand that basically all you have to do is subtract average total cost from price and multiply it by quantity, because that's what this rectangle is its price minus average total cost times the base of the rectangle, which is the profit maximizing quantity. So the profit and loss, here's your best way to calculate it. You want to do price minus average total cost times quantity. Now let me explain this price minus average total cost idea to you. We'll come over here. Well, yeah, I'll leave that there. What does it mean, price minus average total cost? Well, what is price? Price is the revenue per unit. That's how much revenue the company is receiving for every unit it sells. So price is revenue per unit. And what is average total cost? Well, that is the cost per unit, because we're taking total cost, dividing it by quantity. Each quantity is each unit of quantity. And so average total cost is the cost per one unit. The cost per one unit and the revenue per one unit. And if you subtract the cost per unit from the revenue per unit, you get the profit per unit. Profit per unit. And if you know that you are going to earn $20 profit on every unit you sell, and you sell 700 of them, then all you have to do is multiply the $20 profit per unit times the 700 you're selling. And that's what we would have here. This is the profit per unit, which in this case is $20 times quantity is 700. And so we know that the profit we're going to earn is going to be $14,000. This company is going to earn profit of $14,000. 20 times 700. And we could just as easily get that number by doing $63,000 minus $49,000. Okay? And so this is to analyze a company using this market structure graph here, or this, really in this case it's not a market structure graph, it is the structure, the cost structure and revenue structure for an individual company. And you need to be able to just look at one of these graphs and say, oh, I know what's going on here, I can see their situation, and here's a decision that they may need to make. Okay? Remember, first decision is always what's the quantity, second decision is always what's the price. The third decision we're going to do in the next segment of this lesson. But right now, before we do that segment, I want to go through a few more examples where I'm going to give you the opportunity to identify all this information right here on a few more graphs. All right, so let's go back to this other example that we have done before. And remember, when we did this particular example, that we had identified the profit maximizing quantity, right? We have identified then the price, then we identified the average variable cost, the average total cost, and then the average fixed cost. And so now you can sort of start to see the rectangles that are forming in here, and so we can use this information to identify total revenue, total cost, variable cost, fixed cost, and then profit or loss. Okay? So let's start with total revenue. Remember, total revenue is equal to price times quantity. So you could just simply go to where the price is, which is $56, and multiply it by the profit maximizing quantity, which is 300 units. And so now, here's the interesting thing. The rectangles are now a little bit different. I want you to notice that the price is not the highest dollar amount. Average total cost is now actually higher than price. So you're not going to do the big giant rectangle as total revenue. You're only doing the rectangle that goes as high as the price. So it's this rectangle right here that represents the total revenue of the firm, because we are multiplying the price, which is the height of this rectangle, 56, times quantity, which is the width of this rectangle. And price, 56, times quantity, 300. All right, got a calculator here, and so we said 56 times 300. Not that I don't trust myself, but you know. All right, and sure enough, it's 16,800. Okay? All right, so now we want to identify the total cost. And what we said about total cost is that total cost is going to be average total cost times quantity, right? So that is the rectangle that goes all the way up to average total cost and over to the profit maximizing quantity. So now the total cost rectangle is actually larger than the total revenue rectangle. Now I want you to think about what that's probably going to mean in a couple minutes. Okay, so average total cost is 63. So that's the height. The profit maximizing quantity. Now this is calculus. Those of you who understand calculus, this is an area problem, right? And so if you remember area problems with integrals, what we're basically doing here is we're integrating the average total cost over a quantity of 300. This is our upper limit of integration. Our lower limit of integration is 0. Okay, and all it's giving us is the area of a region, an area of a rectangle. So 63 times 300, 63 times 300, that's going to be 18,900. And so you can see here that the total cost is actually larger than the total revenue. That can be a problem for a business. Okay, now our variable cost. Okay, so variable cost is going to be the height of the average variable cost rectangle times the width of the average variable cost rectangle. That's this rectangle in here, okay? And so that rectangle has a height of 42 and a base of 300. And so this region right in here is going to represent the average variable cost, or it's not the average, sorry, it's going to represent the variable cost, okay? And 42 times 300, 42 times 300, that's going to be 12,600. So we got average variable cost times quantity. What did I say it was? 12,600. All right. And now to find the fixed cost, remember we said that fixed cost is average fixed cost times quantity. Okay, and remember, average fixed cost is the distance between average variable cost and average total cost. So this rectangle right here is representing the fixed cost. So we have the average fixed cost times the quantity. So the average fixed cost here is 21 times 300. 21 times 300, and that is 6,300. So fixed cost is 6,300. Now, here's the interesting thing. Before we calculate profit or loss, okay, there's a line running through our fixed cost rectangle. We did not have that in the last example. This is meaningful for the analysis of this business, but it's important to understand that this larger rectangle here is representing the fixed cost of the company. Okay, the whole thing, but it's split into two parts. We have this rectangle up here, and then we have this rectangle down here. Okay, but this whole rectangle here, if we ignore that line, this bigger rectangle is the fixed cost of the company. Now also remember that the large rectangle, if we add variable cost plus fixed cost, gives us the total cost of the company. All right, and so now it's time to calculate the profit or the loss. And remember that this calculation is going to be price minus average total cost times quantity. Now, in this case, the price is 56 and the average total cost is 63. So 56 minus 63, that's -7. And that's going to be times the quantity, which is 300. So really what we're doing here is -7 times 300, which is going to give us negative $2,100. And that, because it's a negative number, that is a loss for the business. So it's not profit. In this particular case, we are calculating a loss. That rectangle is represented by this little tiny thing that runs between average total cost and price. So this little tiny rectangle in here is representing, I'm going to put it in red, is representing a loss for the business, okay? And then this, what this is, this little rectangle, you might be saying, well, what's that rectangle called? The one that's here. Well, it's partially fixed costs. That is called recovered fixed costs, but we're going to get to that in just a little bit in the next segment of the lesson, okay? And so we have calculated these 5 important values for this particular business. All right, so here's another example. We did this previously where we identified all the important information. We already identified the profit maximizing quantity. Now what we want to do is we want to identify the total revenue, the total cost, the variable cost, fixed cost, and the profit or loss given these little rectangles here, okay? All right, so we know that total revenue, how do we identify total revenue? Well, that's equal to price times quantity, right? And price times quantity, price is $35, and the quantity is 1,800 units. And so you see this rectangle here, which is now really weird because the last couple examples that we did, the total revenue rectangle was the largest of all the rectangles. And now it is like, it's kind of the shortest one that goes all the way to the bottom. But there it is, price, height of price, width of quantity. This is the total revenue that this particular company is going to earn in its best situation, which doesn't look very promising, right? So let's go ahead and calculate it. So the height of the rectangle is $35. The width of the rectangle is 1,800 units. So we just need to multiply those two things. $35 times 1,800 units, and we get $63,000. So the total revenue for this company is going to be $63,000, right? Now, let's calculate the total cost. Remember that total cost, the formula for total cost is average total cost times quantity. And so average total cost way up here is $50. What I want you to see here is here's the rectangle. It goes all the way up here, then all the way over here, and then all the way down here. Now, just like the last example that we just did, the total cost rectangle is the largest of all of the rectangles. It's the whole thing. And so we're going to do $50 times 1,800. So 50 times 1,800, whoops, hang on a second. 50 times 1,800, that's going to be $90,000. And look, this does not look like a good situation for this company. They're in another situation where their total cost is larger than their total revenue. And so, down here we're going to have a loss because we're going to have a negative number, okay? Let's go ahead and calculate the variable cost. Remember, variable cost is going to be average variable cost times quantity. And here's average variable cost, 40. Now this one now is a larger rectangle than the total revenue rectangle. And that's going to give us an interesting situation, okay, which you'll see in the next segment, okay? So average variable cost is 40 times the quantity, which is 1,800. So 40 times 1,800, oops, it's going to be $72,000. So the variable cost for this company at its profit maximizing quantity is going to be $72,000. And then now the fixed cost, remember, is going to be the difference between average total cost and average variable cost. So average fixed cost times quantity. And the average fixed cost here is $10 times 1,800 units. And 1,800 times 10 is 18,000. And therefore, the fixed cost for this company is going to be $18,000. I hope that you got that right when you calculated it. And now, here's what I want to do. I want you to see. I'm not going to fill in. I'm not going to shade them in this time because it's a little weird. Okay? Now to find the profit and the loss, remember that profit and loss is going to be price minus average total cost times quantity. Price in this case now is 35 minus average total cost, which is 50. That is negative $15 times the quantity of 1,800 units. And that is now this rectangle in here. This rectangle is now representing our loss situation. And that rectangle is much larger than the example that we just did. And so negative 15 times 1,800 is going to be negative $27,000. So this company is now experiencing a loss. And a lot of time, well, you don't put the parentheses with the negative, but this company is experiencing a loss of $27,000. And they're probably not really happy about that. And the loss rectangle is this larger overlapping rectangle with this average variable cost line running through it. Okay? Let's just do one more example of these. All right, so now here's one more example. We want to identify our total revenue, total cost, variable cost, fixed cost, and profit and loss. This time, I didn't leave the information up. We got a fresh graph here. I want you to pause the video and try to identify all of this financial information based on this structure of this particular company. Go. All right, so the first thing we need is we got to identify the profit maximizing quantity. So we go to where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. That's right here. We'll come down here. This is our profit maximizing quantity, which is 60 units. We're going to, in order to identify the total revenue is price times quantity. Okay, we now have quantity, which is 60. Price, we're going to have to go all the way up to the demand curve and over. So that's right here. This is going to be our price. And that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So price of $10. And so $10 times 60 units, that's $600. So total revenue is going to be $600. Total cost, that's going to be average total cost times quantity. And so we need to know what the average total cost is. So we're going to go to our profit maximizing quantity. We're going to go up to our average total cost curve. We're going to come over here. So right here, this is our average total cost, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's $7, and therefore $7 times 60 units, that's $420. So the total cost for this business is going to be $420. Now we want to know what our variable cost is, which is going to be our average variable cost times quantity. And so here's our profit maximizing quantity. We're going to go up to average variable cost, and we're going to come over. That's right here, AVC, which is $1, 2, 3, 4, $5. And $5 times 60 units, that's $300. So our variable cost is $300. Now, for our fixed costs, we could just do total cost minus variable cost, which is $120. But let's go ahead and see it graphically. We know that fixed cost is equal to average fixed cost times quantity. Average fixed cost is average total cost minus average variable cost. So average fixed cost is $7 minus $5, which is $2. We do $2, this rectangle right here, this rectangle right there, okay? Hopefully maybe you drew it in. I'm just going to show you. I'm not going to actually put it in. So 60, a quantity of 60 times a height of $2, that's 120. So fixed cost is going to be $120. Now we want to determine whether we are profiting or losing. And so profit or loss is going to be equal to price minus average total cost times quantity. And so here, price minus average total cost, price is 10, average total cost is 7. 10 minus 7, that's $3. So we go $3 times quantity is 60. Profit maximizing quantity is 60. And so $3 times 60, that is 180. That is a positive number. Therefore, this business is profiting. And this is the maximum profit that they could possibly earn. There we go. And we can see the profit rectangle if we go from here up here. You can see here the difference between price and average total cost. So this is the height of the profit rectangle. Then we're going to go all the way over to the profit maximizing quantity, then up to the demand curve here and over here. And this rectangle right here represents the profit rectangle. This rectangle right here represents the fixed cost of the business. This rectangle right here represents the variable cost of the business. This rectangle that includes both the fixed cost and the variable cost is the total cost of the business. And this really large rectangle right here that goes from here up to the demand curve and over here represents the total revenue of the business. And therefore, you are able to identify all that important financial information just from looking at a graph. You should be able to do, I should be able to give you any graph, and you should be able to calculate all these things up after this lesson.